Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're really thrilled to be able to provide this webinar in collaboration with the Anxiety and Depression Association of America to talk about a topic that is of a lot of interest to people that I hear from nowadays and where a lot of our work is focused, which is understanding how different digital tools might be able to help you manage your mental health and wellness, especially related to depression and anxiety. And so today we're going to be talking about apps for anxiety and depression. So I just want to really just welcome everyone to the presentation and talk a little bit about the structure. We're going to do some introductory material to really talk to people about different apps that are out there for depression and anxiety and how to think about how to determine an app that might be the best fit for you. Also talk about some of the benefits and some of the limitations of apps. And then we're going to have a discussion between myself and Martha, who's co-presenting with me, to go through some of the most common questions that we get asked when we're talking about apps for depression and anxiety. So as a bit of introduction to myself and Martha first, my name is Stephen Schuler. I am the executive director of One Mind Cyber Guide. I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Psychological Science at the University of California, Irvine. I'm trained as a clinical psychologist and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And a lot of my research and work focuses on using technology to expand the access to and accessibility of mental health services. I've also conducted multiple trials evaluating different digital interventions, internet websites, mobile applications for the treatment and prevention of depression and anxiety. And so I'm really happy to join you guys for this webinar today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Martha Neary, and I am the Program Director of One Mind Cyber Guide, and I am a digital mental health specialist at the Department of Psych Sciences at the University of California in Irvine. And I really oversee our day-to-day activities at One Mind Cyber Guide, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about mental health apps and also learning from people what they want from mental health apps and what they think about existing apps.
So just to go over our agenda for what we'll cover today. Today we'll talk about the unmet needs for mental health, and technology can be one resource that can help cope with and deal with some of these needs. We'll introduce what mental health apps are. We'll talk about some of the different challenges and opportunities of using mental health apps. And we'll talk specifically about how people might be able to find mental health apps that best meet their needs. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have this frequently asked questions portion at the end of this presentation, which will go over some of the questions that we hear most often about mental health apps through the work that we do at One Mind Cyber Guide. So just as some starting material to think about the real needs that are out there and how mental health apps might be able to address these needs, 1 in 5 adults in the United States experience a mental health issue. And many of the individuals who experience these mental health issues do not receive effective treatments. And so that's one of the things that we really try to address through the use of technology to help treat and prevent depression and anxiety, is that there are huge amount of needs out there in terms of mental health. From ADAA's own information, at any point in time, 3 to 5% of people suffer from a current major depressive episode, and the lifetime risk is about 17%. So that shows that many people will be touched by major depressive disorder themselves. And if you don't experience it yourselves, very likely someone in your close circle will. Friends, a family member, a colleague. Depression touches the lives of many people. Overall, this accounts for about 264 million people worldwide. And just given that large amount of need, we are never going to address this burden of disorder through traditional services alone. We will never have enough providers. And so mental health apps can be one tool in the toolbox to be able to help cope with this large burden of depression. Similarly, an estimated 48 million US adults experience anxiety every year. So when you look at depression and anxiety, these are the two most common mental health challenges that people face. And again, similar to depression, just given the large burden of anxiety disorders, we're never going to be able to treat anxiety disorders through traditional services alone. Another challenge we have in terms of this supply-demand gap for mental health services is that there is a lack of access to care. So nearly half of the 60 million adults and children living with mental health conditions in the US go without any treatment whatsoever. And half of the US counties have no access to mental health care. What this map shows on the slide here is the distributions of licensed psychologists across the country. And so places where you see the dark purple are places where we have a significantly higher proportion of psychologists, and places that are in this like tan color are places where it is statistically lower. And so you see, on the coasts, there tend to be, more psychologists than other places. And in the middle of the country, there are significantly fewer licensed psychologists. And in fact, 1 out of every 3 counties in the United States has not one licensed clinical psychologist. And this map is just showing psychologists, but I'll say that similar figures would be true if we looked at other mental health professionals. If we looked at psychiatrists, if we looked at social workers, there's just a lot of places in the country where you're not going to be able to get a provider. Even for those who receive care, very few people actually receive high quality care, which is defined as having sufficient sessions and an adequate dose to lead to benefits in terms of the challenges that a person is facing. Many people who receive services don't actually achieve remission or relief from the symptoms that they're experiencing. And so there's a real need to be able to provide more resources. And I think one of the big shifts that needs to happen in terms of providing resources is that resources need to take multiple forms. We're never going to be able to solve this problem through professionals alone. And so we have to think about ways to expand and differentiate different services and different resources that are available to people. So enter technology. There are thousands of apps out there which aim to help people get support for their mental health. Mental health apps are potentially very scalable. We can provide mental health apps in ways that reduce the demands on professional care. They can be used as additional resources and continuum of care models to provide support to individuals who might benefit from apps themselves, as well as in combination with providers to be able to provide additional services or additional supports. And we have a really important moment we're in right now, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen that virtual offerings have become more prevalent and more popular. More people have been turning to virtual care options to be able to receive their support. And for individuals who've been reluctant to use virtual care options before, they've often gone to it out of necessity. But that's allowed people to get more comfortable using virtual care, to better understand and build their digital literacy. That makes it easier to receive care in these different mediums and just makes it a lot more feasible for technology to be used as a care option for people. So we have this really great opportunity right now to think about the lessons we've learned over the past 18 months and think about how we can continue to keep the best stuff that technology has given us in ways to better integrate it into our care delivery pathways. So what do mental health apps actually do? What are mental health apps? If you haven't used a mental health app before, this is a broad overview of some of the different types of features and functions that are present in mental health apps. Many mental health apps provide some type of interactive content that helps teach us some of the skills that one would learn in traditional psychotherapy practices. So meditation, for example, is a very popular feature that shows up in mental health apps. And usually these meditation apps have some educational content to teach people about what meditation is. as well as different video and audio tracks that help people engage in their meditation practices. So this is an example of a meditation app called Smiling Mind. Mental health apps also help people track aspects of themselves, such as their symptoms, mood, or medications that they're taking, to gain better insights or understanding of their own selves. And so mood tracking is a very common feature that we see in a variety of different mental health apps. And this is a mood tracking app called Dailyo that allows you to track your mood each day and to indicate some of the different triggers or things that you might be dealing with on those days. Again, to provide some better insights into what might lead to some different negative moods or positive moods that you're experiencing. You know, what gets you down or what helps cheer you up. And those are things that you might be able to understand through using a mood tracking app or a mood tracking feature with an app with other features. Apps can also be really useful to help find different resources. This is an app called COVID Coach that has a variety of different resources, crisis support, finding help online, information about meeting your basic needs. And COVID Coach was developed specifically to deal with some of the stress and anxiety that comes from the COVID-19 pandemic, and also has some information specifically related to COVID. And then we also see cognitive behavioral therapy skills that are taught through applications in different ways. And so this is a screenshot from an app called Wobot, which is a chatbot app, allows you to talk with a virtual artificial intelligence agent that is teaching you some of the skills that you would learn in cognitive behavioral therapy. So this, again, similar to meditation, packages some of the skills that one would learn in therapy in a way that you can take on the go in this mobile application. And not all cognitive behavioral therapy apps are chatbot apps. You might also have apps that allow you to engage or learn skills of cognitive behavioral therapy in different mediums or different forms. I also want to talk about what mental health apps do not do, and to really call out that mental health apps are not replacements for traditional resources or for mental health professionals. Mental health apps can help support or augment some of the care that's being provided, or can enter into a continuum of care, such that they might be introductions to people who have not previously received services, or might be able to use after one receives care in ways to sort of reinforce or build on the lessons that one learned in treatment that they received. But again, mental health apps do not replace the need for professionals. They do not replace the need to having professionals. As I mentioned earlier, given the large burden of depression and anxiety, we will never have enough professionals to treat all of those people in need. And so this is not an issue of like replacing professionals. We still need professionals out there, but about expanding the portfolio of available resources such that we might be able to provide the most effective resources to everyone who needs them, and that everyone who needs support will be able to get care. And so apps might be able to function some ways in this way of sort of market segmentation or providing different resources for different people. And so apps can be a tool in the toolkit. Mental health apps are not panaceas. They're not going to solve all the problems, and they're not going to work for everybody. But again, they can be a useful tool in the toolbox to help some people receive care and support that could be helpful for them. So just to go over some of the main sort of pros and cons of mental health apps, some of the challenges that we face when using mental health apps is that there might be privacy concerns about using these apps, especially when you're putting information about yourself and information that might be particularly sensitive as it relates to mental health topics. We really want to make sure that mental health apps are addressing privacy concerns appropriately. Mental health apps may not be equally available and accessible for diverse groups and their unique needs. It's really hard to find apps that are in languages other than English. Apps might also have different data or technology demands that make them harder to use on older smartphone devices or across diverse devices. Many apps don't consider aspects of accessibility, such as having functionality to help with screen readers or for individuals who might experience other challenges in terms of accessing these apps or these programs. And so we really need to think about ways in which we can help support the development of apps that really address more diverse needs from people, but also just really call out that there might be some challenges of finding an app that's appropriate for you if you have needs that are not reflected in the apps that are currently available. And there's also lack of formal regulation. There's very few products that the FDA regulatory pathway applies to, and very few products that have received FDA clearance at this point of view. And outside of the FDA, there is very little regulation or evaluation of these products by any formal structures. And so it's really hard to be able to figure out, which apps are quality and which apps are not. But there's a lot of benefits from mental health apps too. It allows us to take care on the go and have these resources available 24/7 at the times and places we might need help the most. They're scalable, so it reduces the reliance on professionals. It doesn't replace them, but it can reduce the reliance and increase the efficiency and the ability of providers to focus resources on individuals who might be most in need of in-person and traditional care. And you can also often access these tools with no appointments or wait times. And I know that's a current challenge in the COVID pandemic, is that there are long wait times to access a lot of mental health services. And so again, these might be a good entry resource to provide some initial support for people who are coming to mental health services or mental health care for the first time. And then I'm going to pass it over to Martha.
Thanks, Stephen. So now that you've seen some examples of what mental health apps do, and we've talked a little bit about how they might be helpful for people, we really wanted to give you an opportunity to actually use one. So we're going to just walk through a very short, simple 2-minute breathing exercise from an app called Headspace. And we'd invite you to follow along with this for the next couple of minutes and just see how you feel after the exercise.
So once you're sitting comfortably, just taking a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, focusing on the lungs filling with air. As you exhale, just gently closing the eyes. As you feel the weight of the body press down. And as you pause, just noticing where in the body you feel the breath right now. So we're not going to breathe in any special way. Instead, we're going to listen or notice the natural rhythm of breathing, noticing whether it's fast or slow, whether the breaths are short or long. If you can't feel any movement in the body at all, just gently placing your hand on your stomach. And just resting the mind on that rising and falling sensation. So nothing else to do, nothing else to think about. Allowing thoughts to come and go. And just resting the mind on the breath. And when you're ready, you can just gently open the eyes again.
So thanks for following along with us, if you were able to do so. And of course, mental health apps, there are a lot of different exercises that will be included in mental health apps. This breathing exercise is just one example of the kinds of things that you might find in a mental health or wellness app. But personally, I really like these short exercises because I find there's something that's easy to use throughout the day. If I find myself getting a little bit stressed or overwhelmed, I can just take out my phone and engage in that exercise for 2 minutes. It's not a huge burden in my day. It's not taking up a lot of my time. And it just really gives me a chance to kind of center myself and regroup, I suppose, before continuing with the rest of my day. So that, again, just an example of the kinds of things that mental health apps can help you with. So now that you've seen some types of mental health apps and had a chance to engage with them, let's talk about, do they actually work? So there's a lot of emerging evidence to show that apps are effective for things like depression, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, stress, distress, quality of life, and also they can be helpful with positive emotions. And there are a number of randomized control trials that really are starting to show the effectiveness of mental health apps. And we see that these things are particularly helpful or effective when they're used alongside professional guidance. And this is really going back to Stephen's earlier point about these things not being a replacement for professional care. The graph on the right here shows that when used with a person, so alongside a provider versus used standalone without the help of a professional, the benefits of apps for depression, anxiety, stress, and quality of life can be, far exceed when being used with a person as opposed to without a person. So again, just really showing that, these things can be great tools to really supplement professional care and enhance the skills or the skills you're learning or the treatment you're receiving with a licensed professional. So we've talked about there is emerging evidence to support the use of these products. One challenge, though, with the marketplace, the mental health app marketplace, is that it can be pretty overwhelming. So there are estimates suggest there are roughly 325,000 apps for health available on the app stores today. So that's a huge number. Between 10,000 and 15,000 of those are for mental health. And estimates also suggest that over 200 new products are being added to the marketplace every day. So the marketplace is really growing exponentially. There's a huge number of products to choose from. And this can mean that it can be a little bit challenging to navigate the marketplace and choose the app that's right for you. There's also a challenge of high availability but low evidence base. Again, there are thousands and thousands of products out there, but few of them have actually been investigated in a research study. The majority of apps don't have efficacy data. Only a small number of apps have rigorous evidence demonstrating efficacy, probably about 100 out of the 10,000 to 15,000 apps that we see out there. The apps that don't have evidence may, at best just be ineffective and may actually at worst potentially be damaging for people. Luckily there haven't been many, but we have come across a couple of examples of mental health apps that contain really, critically wrong advice for people in managing their mental health. One infamous example that we call on as an example of this is an app for bipolar disorder, which advised users to take a shot of hard liquor before bed during a manic episode. And of course, this is terrible, terrible advice. And luckily that app is no longer available on the app stores. But this is part of the challenge and part of what we're up against when there are just so many products to choose from on the marketplace. In addition to this, a very small portion of apps account for the majority of users. So most people are using a very small amount of the thousands of apps that are available out there. When it comes to depression and anxiety apps, the top 3 apps for anxiety and the top 3 apps for depression account for 90% of downloads and regular users. So they're really having a huge share of the marketplace and a huge share of the users who are using mental health apps. 63% of depression apps and 56% of anxiety apps actually have no users at all when we look at regular monthly users. So this kind of tells us that, given the popularity of a very, very small subset of apps, you really can't just rely on word of mouth or what people are using. There are a lot more options than those you may have already heard about, such as the apps on screen here like Calm, Headspace, Youper, and Wysa. And there may be limitations to the options you have heard about. They just may not necessarily be the best fit for you, which makes it worth exploring alternatives. To go back to Stephen's earlier point, there's no one app to rule them all. Different things are going to work for different people. So if you're interested in using a mental health app, it's really worth exploring the broader marketplace and exploring beyond these apps that you may have heard of or that many, many people are using. Another limitation is that the apps that are available capture a very small subset of evidence-based practices. And when we say evidence-based practices, we mean approaches to supporting and managing mental health that have scientific evidence supporting their use. So there are a range of science-backed interventions that have been shown to be effective at reducing depression and anxiety, but they actually rarely show up in the depression and anxiety apps that are available on the marketplace. And most apps really tend to replicate the same types of interventions. On this slide, you can see that things like psychoeducation, assessment, relaxation, mindfulness, meditation are really popular evidence-based treatments across anxiety and depression apps. But there are also a range of other evidence-based practices that can also be helpful for supporting anxiety and depression, and we don't really see those coming up in mental health apps that are publicly available. You've probably all gone to the App Store at some point to download any kind of app, and you may have seen that there are user reviews there that can kind of help guide your choices. One challenge though with the user reviews is that they're not really detailed enough to help us find the app that's the right fit for us as an individual. The user reviews rarely provide information that is useful enough to help you make a decision. Most apps tend to be reviewed relatively well, and the information that can really help differentiate products and help you choose decide which app to choose are not really provided in the user reviews. People who leave reviews are also more likely to be people who had maybe a particularly positive or particularly negative experience to share. So it can be hard to know what the majority of people think about the app. And they also don't tell us about things like evidence-based practices. So all of this kind of comes together to really, show that it is quite challenging to find the right mental health app for you. But it's certainly not impossible, and there are resources to help. And one of those resources is One Mind Cyber Guide. And we really aim to help you make choices around mental health apps. That's our whole mission. We want to put the information in your hands and really help guide your choices around mental health apps and help you choose the app that's right for you. So we review available technologies and apps for mental health. On our website at onemindcyberguide.org, we provide objective reviews of mental health apps that are free of any preference or bias or endorsement. We have a trained team of app reviewers who download the apps, use them for a little while, and then complete the reviews based on our developed metrics. All of these reviews are publicly available for anyone to read on our app guide, which again is at onemindcyberguide.org. And we really just aim to empower people to make informed decisions, and again, want to really put the information in your hands and help you choose the right app for you. On our app guide, you can read reviews of over 200 apps. So that may sound like a lot, but there are ways that you can start to really narrow down those 200 plus products. You can filter based on the conditions or treatment types or target audiences that you're interested in. For example, on the screen here, if you're looking for a mindfulness app to help you with stress and anxiety, you can filter the products based on those criteria. You can also filter by audience. So if you're looking for an app, for example, for the LGBTQ+ community, there are filters there to really help you start to narrow down the app selections and try to come up with a few options that might be a good fit for you. So I want to talk a little bit about how we actually evaluate the products. I mentioned that we have a trained team of app reviewers, and these are the metrics that they use to review the different mental health apps that we have in our app guide. So the first is credibility. So this is really looking at the research supporting the technology. We look at both direct research evidence. So if the product has been investigated in a research study, we also look at indirect research evidence. So again, going back to the evidence-based practices that the app is grounded in. And we also look at the credibility of the development process, who developed the app and how well maintained it is. And this is really aiming to get at the question of, how likely is it that this app will actually work for me? We also look at user experience. As the name suggests, this is really the overall experience of using a particular app. How fun, easy to use, engaging, interesting is the app. Aiming to answer the question of how likely is it that I will actually use this app? We look at transparency of privacy policies. So here we are reviewing privacy policies to check if key pieces of information are included in the policy that we believe developers should be transparent about in letting users know what actually happens to their data when they use the app. So getting at this question of, again, what happens to data I enter into this app? So those are our 3 metrics. And finally, we also have a number of products on the app guide that have professional reviews associated with them. And these professional reviews are when a professional in a relevant field, maybe a clinical psychologist or a social worker or a marriage and family therapist, downloads the app and uses it, and then writes a more narrative description of the app, talking about the pros and cons and highlighting some recommendations for use. So what do the professionals say? And I want to note that, so we review on all of these metrics because much as there is no one app that will be the right fit for everyone, there's no magic number for mental health app reviews either. Different things are going to be important to different people. And what metric you focus on most will really be a personal decision and depend on what's most important to you as you're thinking about mental health apps that you want to use. As an example of that, for me, user experience is a really, really important factor for me. So I know if I open an app and it's glitchy or it's not working properly or it's really difficult to navigate, I'm probably not going to use that app long enough to really reap the benefits, even if there is a ton of research supporting its use. So I'm not going to continue using that app. So for me, user experience is a really crucial decision-making factor. For other people, credibility might be to the forefront of their minds more, really wanting to find something that is grounded in evidence-based practices and has research supporting its use. And for other folks, concerns around transparency or data security and privacy may be very important as well. So this is why there's sort of a trade-off between the metrics, and it's important to think about what's important for you as you're reviewing or as you're making choices around mental health apps. I want to also note that we are thrilled to be a partner with ADAA. And so in addition to having app reviews on our website, we also host a number of app reviews on the ADAA website. And I've included the link here that you can where you can visit that page. And on this page, we have a selection of products that are we think might be particularly helpful or a good fit for people who are looking for support with anxiety and depression. So on the ADAA app page, there are also, many products, a couple dozen products reviewed there. And you can see that, the information included on the ADAA website also includes a summary of our reviews, a description of the product, and some information around cost and target audience and target conditions. So would really encourage you to also check out the ADAA page of mental health apps, where we've highlighted these products that we have reviewed. And that can be a really great place to start if you're looking for apps to support with anxiety and depression. So now we wanted to talk through some kind of frequently asked questions around mental health apps. So these are questions that have come up a lot from people that we speak to about mental health apps. And so we wanted to walk through some of them. And if you have other questions on mental health apps that aren't captured here, please feel free to connect with us. You can do that on social media and ask your questions there. And we're always thrilled to hear from people who are, have questions or want to engage in conversations around digital mental health tools. So the first question, and I'll pass this over to Stephen to answer this first, is, how often do I need to use an app to get benefits? I think this is a question that we hear a lot. People, are unsure, is it a couple minutes a day? Is it an hour a day? How often throughout the week they need to use these products? So Stephen, any advice or guidance you can give on how often people need to use an app to get benefits?
Well, you definitely have to use it. And I think that that's one of the, the challenges with a lot of these tools is that, unlike a professional or other types of services where there's some accountability, it's hard to no-show to a appointment because you've got the responsibility of showing up for that other person. It's often easy to no-show on your phone or an app. And so I think we see challenges across the board with like low engagement on these tools. And so definitely, just like brushing your teeth or any other sort of act of self-care, you have to do it and you have to do it repeatedly. Now, I think one of the things that's sort of unique about mental health apps compared to traditional services is that it doesn't have to be a lot of time on each of those like individual uses or sessions. Similarly to brushing your teeth, it's something you do, twice a day for 2 to 3 minutes, and it keeps your teeth healthy. And so, the way that we use apps can often be sort of a similar way is that, it could be a couple minutes, here and there throughout the day. In one study we ran, actually, we found that people benefited from using mental health apps, and that the average amount of time a person spent on each session was about a minute, but they spent about 30 sessions throughout the week. They were going back to the apps like multiple times. Now, I'm not saying you have to use an app 30 times a week, but depending on the app, it might change in terms of how you're using it. So for like a meditation app, for example, you might use it for 5 to 10 minutes each day, either when you wake up or right before you go to bed, or when you're taking a meditation break sometime throughout the day. For an app like a mood tracking app, you might use it, those 30 times a week. You might track your mood multiple times per day to gain some better insights in terms of what pushes your mood up or what pushes your mood down. So there's no one answer to this, but I think I really want to emphasize the point that you want to be using these apps in a way that allows their use to become more of a habit or something more regular, and also find a way that they really integrate into the fabric of your daily life. Is there anything else that you think you'd like to add there, Martha?
Yeah, I think the piece around integrating these things into the fabric of your daily life is really important. I know for me, when I've used different apps in the past or currently, I tried to kind of tie it to something that I already do during the day, like a habit that I've already formed. So maybe that's, I brush my teeth and then I use the app that I'm using, or I have my morning coffee and then I use the app that I'm using. And really just tying it into something that already exists in my day, I find can be quite helpful. Another thing that I think is great about having these digital tools is that you can also set notifications on the apps to really remind you to use the app regularly. So I may not remember to use my app if I don't see a notification pop up on my screen at a certain time and to tell me to use it. And most apps will allow you to set those notifications at the time that you think makes sense in your day to use the app. So you can set it for that morning coffee time or for that brushing teeth time, and really trying to build it into things that you're already doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think that, you can think about using these apps in different ways. And so some is to say, at this time, 9 o'clock when I start my bedtime routine, I'm going to use my meditation app. You might think about, different triggers or things that might lead you to go to that app as well. So for example, like if I have a fight with that coworker who I've been having difficulty getting along with lately, I'll use my cognitive behavioral therapy app as a way to remember the skills I've been practicing. So tying the use of that app to either, a very concrete thing that you know is going to happen, or something that you might be dealing with that you anticipate could happen, is ways to think about both the kind of regular and also reactive sort of use of these products is, I think, a really good way.
Yeah, for sure.
So Martha, why don't you start with this question then? And this is a question we hear a lot, is how do I find the right app?
Yeah, definitely. This is probably one of the most common questions that we get asked is, what app should I use? How do I find the right app? And I think there are a couple of different places and resources you can use to do this. Of course, would, recommend people to check out our app guide at CyberGuide, at onemindcyberguide.org. And, again, as going back to our walkthrough of the app guide, really start to use that to narrow down the types of products that you might be interested in. Definitely the ADAA website, the section on mental health apps, is a really great resource as well. And what's really nice about that is it's a slightly smaller set of apps for you to navigate through. And it's already been kind of curated with anxiety and depression in mind. So that can also be a great place to start walking through some of those reviews there. Also would, if it's something that people are comfortable doing, would also encourage you to, talk to friends and family and get, recommendations for mental health apps. I think these things are becoming more and more popular, and more people have heard of things like Calm or like Headspace. So, why not ask people who actually know you well and may have, tailored recommendations for things they think you might like. And that can also be a nice opportunity to really kind of start a conversation as well around mental health and wellness. If you see a provider, try asking them for recommendations for apps as well. Chances are your provider may have apps that they like using, and they may also be able to recommend apps that they feel will really fit well with, the treatment that you're receiving and the skills that you're building. I think more and more providers are becoming familiar with these products, and even we hear anecdotal reports of, clients coming into a provider with a particular app that they're already using and really presenting that to their providers. So it's something that's being integrated, I think, into treatment more and more. So there are a few places to find mental health apps. And I guess a couple of other just more general recommendations I'd say are, be open to trying out a couple of options. We've heard from a lot of people that they really like to try out this sort of trial and error method of downloading a couple of apps. It doesn't have to be a ton of apps, but 2 or 3 apps, and trying them out for a couple of days and really seeing what the fit is like, and if they enjoy using the app, and if they feel that it's the right option for them. Also be open to the possibility that the first app you try may not be the right one for you, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to try a couple of apps before you find one that you really feel is a good fit for you. And also be open to using, maybe multiple apps over time as well. The goal here is not necessarily to find one app that you're going to use for the rest of your life. It's unlikely that you will use the same app for the rest of your life, and that's certainly not any kind of a failure on the app's part. But at different times throughout your life, depending what you're experiencing, different apps may be more or less helpful. So those are kind of some general recommendations, I think, for finding the right app for you. And it is, of course, a very personal decision. And really, it's sometimes I think just that trial and error method of you trying out some products and seeing what you like can be a good first step. What do you think, Stephen? Anything else you'd add there?
Yeah, I think I just want to highlight something you just said, is that I think we should rephrase this question to say, it's not about how do I find the right app, it's about how do you find the right app for you. There is no right app. There's different tools that might be useful for different people. And also those tools might change over time. And so an app that's useful for you right now may not be an app that helps you in the future. And so continuing to think that there might be other tools to add to your toolbox. As Martha sort of noted, we often hear people who use multiple apps, especially at the beginning as exploration, but also to think about there might be tools that sort of support different aspects of one's mental health.
So I think when we talk to people about mental health apps, a lot of times some of the concerns or questions that come up are really around kind of data privacy and security. And we get this question a lot, which is, how do I know if my data is safe and secure? what recommendations would you have for someone to kind of to start to answer this question, or figure out how their data might be safe and secure in a mental health app they use?
Well, I think that the reality of the situation is that the only way that you know your data is safe and secure is if there's no data. If you're putting private sensitive information into the app, there's always a possibility that that information could reach someone you don't want to have it, or and potentially could be used in a way that is not supportive of your mental health and wellness. So I think that's one thing to consider just off the, from the starting point, is that you probably want to have a sense of how comfortable you are with having any information being shared. And that might lead you to use some apps more than others. Some apps maybe require less of entry of information and is more kind of sharing information with you, might be more psychoeducational. If you are using an app that you're putting information into, I think it's really critical to read the privacy policy and the terms of services. And one thing to note is to make sure that an app has a privacy policy. We did a review a couple of years ago of about 120 mental health apps that were intended for depression, and we found about half of those apps didn't even have a privacy policy. And of the ones that did, many only gave you the privacy policy after you already put information about yourself into that application. So I think that if that's something that's important to you, really first step, if it doesn't have a privacy policy, stop there. And then, read those privacy policies to look for information about, like, who is your data being shared with? What ownership do you retain over your data? Are you allowed to delete your data if you want to? These are some of the questions that we look at when we do our review of the privacy policies in our transparency scale. So I think you can look at our transparency scale for guidance, but really I think that some of this is also knowing your own level of comfort with sharing any information. Any other thoughts there, Martha?
Yeah, I guess just to note that there is also, there are some things you can do on your device, at the device level as well, to, be practicing good kind of safety and hygiene, I guess, around data security. And some of those would be, many of these apps allow you to set a PIN or a passcode in the app itself. So that's a really good thing that you can set up. And also, using like device level passcodes to further protect your device. So I think there are some things you can do on your end as well to ensure that, no one sees the data on your phone that you wouldn't want to see that. And I think again, just to drive home the point of, ensuring that there is a privacy policy for the app is really, a really good first step. That's definitely a red flag if we don't see a privacy policy for an app. Usually that will be linked either in the app itself or in the app store. And that's also something that we consider in the transparency review as well.
So Martha, again, a question we hear often is, what are the best apps for anxiety and depression?
Yeah, so this is a tricky question, and definitely a question that we get a lot. And again, we've said this multiple times, so kind of driving home that there really is no one app for anxiety and one app for depression that's going to work for everyone. So I think one thing to think about is that there are a number of established evidence-based practices that can help with anxiety and depression. For example, cognitive behavioral therapy has a lot of research supporting its use for anxiety and depression, and lots of apps provide cognitive behavioral therapy in a digital format. So looking for apps that really take skills that have a lot of research supporting their use and transmit that to a digital format. And I think those types of apps can be among kind of the best apps for anxiety and depression, because we have a lot of research that can suggest that they might be helpful. Would also think about, when we're thinking about what are the best apps, to think about what matters most to you. Again, recognizing this is a very personal decision, but think about what you care about most when you're using an app. Again, I mentioned earlier that, for me, user experience is really important. So if that's an important factor for you, looking at screenshots in the App Store can even give you an idea of what the app looks like and what kind of look and feel of the app is. So really thinking through what are the key decision-making factors for you. And again, in terms of really finding the best apps for anxiety and depression, the ADA website with the mental health apps page on the ADA website is really one of the best places to start to find apps for anxiety and depression. Any other thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, I think another thing about the best app for you is an app that you'll actually use. And so I think that piloting the app early on is really critical to get a sense if it's actually something that you can stick with. Do you see yourself in the app? Does it sort of put off any of those, red flags that would tell you that this is not something that would work for you? So the same thing is true with getting therapy. You have to find a therapist that really clicks with you and that you can work with. And I think finding an app that you can work with is critical as well. And again, there's not going to be one thing that works for everybody. People might like different sort of styles of different interactions, and that's okay.
So we think a lot and talk a lot about the benefits of technology and smartphone apps, but I think we should also acknowledge that smartphone apps do get sometimes can get a bad rap in the media and in press for kind of creating some mental health problems. So this is a narrative that we hear often. So what would you say, Stephen, to this question of aren't smartphones actually causing mental health problems?
Yeah, well, this is definitely a very hot topic in the media, especially with regards to social media and whether it's leading to some of these, leading to cases of depression, anxiety, especially among youth. And I'll say what the majority of the research suggests is that technology use, social media use, screen time has, very small impacts, if any, on mental health and depression, anxiety, and stress, at least at a sort of group or population level. Now, I think what some of that information and that data leaves out is that there are big discrepancies between how any one person might be impacted by these things. In a survey of youth ages 14 to 22, they were surveyed about what impact they thought social media had on their stress, anxiety, and depression when they went to it feeling those things. And about 33% of about a third of the kids said that they thought it made them feel better. About a third of the kids thought it made them feel worse. About a third of the kids thought it had sort of no impact. And so what I think is that we lose is that there are some people who might have negative impact of these things. And so I think that we have to think more carefully about how do we maximize the positive and minimize the negative? How do we mitigate any potential harms? And how do we use technology in ways that actually help support our mental health rather than sort of distracts us or takes away from our mental health or has us fall into any of the sort of traps that are really challenging for our mental health, social comparisons and FOMO and things of the sort that might actually not be so useful for us. And so there's definitely a lot of other reasons why we might see some increases in mental health challenges that we've been seeing recently, and I think are also explanations for what's going on in terms of mental health concerns. Smartphones are a piece of the puzzle of the different experiences that we deal with, but I think overall the data tells us that on average small impact, if any, but again, different people will be impacted by these differently.
Yeah, and I think it's all about finding that balance as well, which sort of leads nicely into this next question, which I think we hear a lot as well, which is that people trying to limit their screen time. So how do I balance using an app and having downtime from my phone? And I think the part of the key here really is to think about the purposes that you're using your phone for, and really think about whether you're using your phone for something that's enhancing your life and adding value and supporting you, versus kind of idling away the time or some sort of escape. And I think we could think of using a mental health app as hopefully falling into the former category, as something that is a valuable use of your time on your phone, whether it's even if it's just a couple of minutes a day. And it is really kind of enhancing your life. And in that way, I think that that can sometimes be a helpful framework to think about your screen time use and what is kind of valuable versus kind of, I don't want to say invaluable, but not as useful screen time. So if you're engaging in a meaningful activity on your phone, for example, using a meditation app to unwind after a stressful day, then that seems to me to be a very enhancing activity. But we do know that people don't get very much benefit from using their phones to sort of escape boredom or doing some doom scrolling or things like that. And definitely the line between enhancement and escape can be blurry. It's not always clear to us when we pick up our phone, it's not always to the forefront of our mind, is this something that's going to enhance my life or not? But just being a little bit more mindful, I think, of the ways that you use your phone and trying to every so often just ask yourself, am I actually doing something with purpose here? And I think the context in which you use your phone also is really important. So, if you're potentially having a positive face-to-face interaction with someone, it's probably best to not be engaging in your phone at that time, even if it is to use a meditation app. I know research has shown that even the presence of a smartphone can kind of decrease the quality of conversations we have with other people. So thinking about that context as well, and when is kind of a good time to use our phones, and when is it best to keep that out of sight. But again, I think it's really about balancing what is helpful and unhelpful screen time use.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, setting limits and realistic limits and quantifiable limits is really useful. Like, you can't set a limit that you're only need to do it on days that end with Y. You have to have limits that actually limit you. But there might also be some apps or things that you might take off your phone if they really are problematic. So that way you have more of a clean and easier experience using your phone in a purposeful way, as Martha mentioned. So I think limits can be really useful, and a really beneficial way to make sure you follow on those limits is to make decisions that make those limits easier, like deleting certain apps on your phone that are problematic and that you might tend to engage in some of that more mindless behavior, like Martha mentioned.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, we also just wanted to share some other resources that might be helpful for you as you're thinking about mental health apps. I mentioned earlier that we have a number of toolkits available on the CyberGuide website, and the link to those is at the bottom here. And these are really, again, kind of curated groups of apps that might be helpful around a particular topic. For example, on the screen here, we can see 3 mindfulness meditation apps and 3 apps that can help with practicing wellness. We also have toolkits for younger folks as well on our site. So this first toolkit is one we developed with the Connected Learning Lab at UCI, really helping young people kind of adjust to the new reality of and the new sort of normal that we're all living through, and also some apps for younger kids as well. And we really would encourage people to, think about creating this kind of pocket self-care toolkit that Stephen mentioned earlier, and think about what are a couple of apps that you can have kind of in your toolkit on your phone that's in your pocket every day, and you can start to use a couple of them throughout the day if you need a little bit of extra support. So this is one example of a pocket self-care toolkit that has some apps around, taking a breather, talking through what's going on for you, engaging in some gamification on apps as well, and goal setting, and also tracking your thoughts or mood or how you're feeling throughout the day. So all of these, and as well as other toolkits, are available on our website. And we really want to thank you for joining us today, and would love to stay connected with you all. So please feel free to visit our website, reach out to us, our emails are here, and also connect with us on social media to continue the conversation. I also wanted to point out that we do have twice a month, we have what we call digital drop-ins, and these are an hour Zoom conversation around a particular topic on digital mental health. And these are really an opportunity, they're very informal, and an opportunity for people to join, ask questions, and really just engage in further conversation around digital tools for mental health. And you can find the information for all of that at our website as well.